Okay, so I want to talk now about the internal fights about slavery within Mexico itself. And remember, Texas is part of Mexico between 1821 and 1836. So what happens is that in 1824, Mexico creates a new constitution. They've just gained their independence from Spain, and they write a new constitution. And in that constitution, you have the creation of Coahuila y Tejas officially. Texas becomes part of the state of Coahuila. It's kind of a subunit within the state of Coahuila. As I said in a previous podcast, there's a 12-person legislature in that state, and only one representative is from Texas. So it has little formal power. Texas has little formal say. And also remember, that the Anglos who are come into Texas, who are starting to come into Texas in the 1820s, they're not happy about this setup. They want to be a standalone state, and one of their big problems is that the capital of Coahuila y Tejas, and you're going to be tested on this, that Texas was a subunit of this big state. This was the biggest state in Mexico, by the way, in 1824, that if they wanted to get anything done, they had to go all the way to Saltillo, which was quite a journey from East Texas. And as I said before, by car, it's still quite a journey. Um, so that's the setup. 1824, Mexican Texas becomes part of a bigger state, Coahuila y Tejas, with Saltillo as the capital. And the other aspect of the Constitution of 1824, the Mexican Constitution of 1824, is this, that it's a federalist constitution. And I know this is detailed, but nonetheless, you have to remember it. So write it down. And what that means in the context of Mexican politics, federalism, it gives most power to state governments. Okay. So what you want to put in your notes is federalism, the federalists in Texas, in Mexico, they want power to be on the local level, in state capitals. Okay. So what this means for Texas is there's a lot of power in Saltillo. A lot of decisions about Texas are made in Saltillo. Most importantly, the decision about whether or not slavery would exist in Mexican Texas is made in Saltillo. So the Federalists, like I say, they want power on the local level. They're kind of, think about Democrats and Republicans in the US today, what you had in Mexico. It's a different setup. You have Federalists, power on the state level. So Saltillo is going to make the decisions about whether or not there's slavery in Mexican Texas. Now, the other big party in Mexico were the Centralists. And like the name sounds, they want the power in Mexico to be centralized in Mexico City. They want the power to be centralized in the national government, which is located in Mexico City. So in 1824, though, the Federalists win. That faction of Mexican politicians who want power on the local level, on the state level. Now, in 1824, Mexico City still has power. It can raise an army, it can tax, so it's not completely powerless. But most of the power resides in state capitals. And for Texas, that means Saltillo. So again, you've got the Federalist, local power, state power, and the Centralists. They want power to be in Mexico City. And the 1824 Constitution is a Federalist Constitution. It gives a lot of power to state governments, which for Texas means Saltillo. Okay. So this was good for Texans if you wanted to keep slavery thriving in Texas. Now, I'm going to talk about the uh, the maneuverings of the pro-slavery faction in Texas, which was almost all the Anglo whites in Texas. But I just want to go, in talking about it, I'm not supporting them or are, rooting for them or anything of the sort. I'm just trying to explain to you their thinking. Okay, so I just want to kind of put that on the table. So why would Anglos in Texas who are pro-slavery, and almost every Anglo in Texas was pro-slavery, why would they be happy that the Mexican Constitution of 1824 was a Federalist Constitution? Because almost all of Mexico, except northern Mexico, was anti-slavery. So if most of the power in Mexico was in Mexico City would have been very hostile to slavery and the introduction of slavery into Mexican Texas, which is happening in the 1820s, beginning with Stephen F. Austin and the other impresarios. So the national government is very, very hostile to slavery in Texas. And don't forget, Texas is the only Mexican state that's a slave state. You don't have slavery anywhere else in Mexico. And generally speaking, Mexicans are very, very anti-slavery. So the Mexican Constitution, the Federalist aspects of the Mexican Constitution of 1824 are good for Texas because the power is located in Saltillo. Now, I talked about how Texas only had one representative in the 12-person legislature in Saltillo, but it had actually much more power than that number would suggest, because in Saltillo, there were allies of Anglos, pro-slavery Anglos, that decided that they supported slavery in Texas. Now, why would people in Saltillo who were based in Saltillo, why would they support slavery when the rest of Mexico was anti-slavery? Well, it's easy. They want cotton production in Texas. They want to have access to the cotton production in Texas. They want the wealth of Texas to grow, which sadly it would grow with the production of cotton. So what you have in Saltillo is you have uh, a couple of forces that are pushing for slavery in Mexican Texas. You have the Anglos, Stephen F. Austin's down there lobbying in favor of slavery. You have Tejano elites such as Juan Seguin, Navarro, Ruiz. Juan Seguin's probably the easiest to remember because, of course, Seguin is just east of Austin. The Seguin family was a very significant family in San Antonio. And Austin and Seguin worked very closely together. In fact, Stephen F. Austin's brother lives with the Seguin family in order to learn Spanish. So the Seguin family works very, very closely with Stephen F. Austin to try to introduce slavery into Mexican Texas, or to continue it in Mexican Texas. And again, it's all about cotton. The Seguins want cotton to be introduced into Texas. And again, cotton equals slavery, slavery equals cotton. Why do they want cotton in Texas? Because they want the wealth that comes from the cultivation of cotton, because cotton is is the commodity that's the most in demand in the globe in the 1820s and 1830s, really all throughout the 1800s. The other allies that the pro-slavery faction in Texas have are folks that were based in Saltillo, and these are the Viesca brothers, Viesca. These are Saltillo-based politicians, and they're very pro-slavery because, again, they're hoping to get a piece of the cotton trade, the cotton economy, if it grows. And everyone knows that the cotton economy will only grow if slavery is allowed into Texas. So what you have is you've got pro-slavery elites from the Tejano elites, such as the Seguin, Ruiz, and Navarro. In the book talks about this. Forget the Alamo. So you've got Tejanos, but basically based in San Antonio, who are pro-slavery, and then you've also got politicians in Saltillo who are pro-slavery as well. And so, what the reality of it is that elite Tejanos were very supportive of slavery being introduced into Mexican Texas. And honestly, these are the only Mexicans that are pro-slavery in all of the Mexican nation. and it's all about their access to cotton. They want cotton to come into Texas, the production of cotton to come into Texas. They want Texas to grow wealthy on the production of cotton. And the understanding was, the view was, is that you can't have the production of cotton without slave labor. Okay. So, and again, Stephen F. Austin, he's very adroit at working with these factions, both in San Antonio and Saltillo, in allying with them and lobbying the legislature in Saltillo and trying to persuade the legislature to allow slavery to exist in Mexican Texas. And as I said before, but it's worth saying again, um, Austin wants Texas to work within the Mexican nation. He's not a spy sent into into Mexican Texas to steal it for the United States. He wants Texas to work as a Mexican state, but it has to be a state that has slavery. In Austin's view, and the view of all the other Anglos in Texas, as well as their Tejano allies and their allies in Saltillo. So if they'd had their way, Texas would have been the only state in the Mexican Republic, because again, the rest of Mexico was very anti-slavery. So what you have in Saltillo after 1824, after the ratification of this Constitution, the question of slavery gets punted to Saltillo. And there becomes a fierce debate within the legislature in Saltillo about what would happen what would be the future of slavery in Texas. So that's the locus of the discussion about slavery at this point. It focuses on Saltillo. It focuses on the Saltillo legislature because they're the ones making decisions about slavery in Texas, not Mexico City. So that's very, very important. And in the next podcast, I'm going to talk about what was the upshot of these very, very intense discussions in Saltillo about the future of slavery in Texas, because there were many politicians in Saltillo who were very anti-slavery, very anti-slavery. Um, and so you have these huge fights within Saltillo about what would be the future of slavery in Mexican Texas between the pro-slavery politicians in Saltillo, the Anglo, Stephen F. Austin representing the Anglos, the Tejanos who were working with Stephen F. Austin, and a small group of politicians based in Saltillo, and then the very, very strong element of anti-slavery politicians in the Saltillo government as well. So in the next podcast, I'm going to talk about the upshot of these very, very intense discussions about the future of slavery in Saltillo itself, which, let me remind you again, it's the state capital of Saltillo, of Coahuila y Tejas, and it's really where the decision about slavery in Texas will be made, not Mexico City, because the Constitution of 1824 in Mexico gave most of the power to state governments.